What is up, guys? Rick Hackus here, and today we are discussing strikes in Destiny and how to improve them. Now, strikes are an essential part of Destiny and have become even more important since the April update was introduced and the Vanguard Quartermaster was updated to give better rewards for leveling up your Vanguard rank. As such, grinding strikes to rank up in Vanguard has now become one of the most common activities players do in Destiny. And why we're talking about how to improve strikes and why it's important to talk about this is because strikes have already been massively improved. Now that maybe sounds a little strange, but essentially, strikes now, after the Taken King, are vastly superior to what they were before the Taken King. The quality of the strikes you're playing right now are at a place that they've never been before. They are absolutely fantastic, again, compared to what the Year 1 strikes were. Now, why were they improved? Well, it's because of videos like this. It's because of people like myself giving ideas, talking about how to improve strikes, talking about things they didn't like, and Bungie actually listening and implementing those changes. So that's why we're again back here today talking about how to further improve strikes in Destiny. Now, with the release of the Taken King, three key factors really contributed to the improvement of strikes. The first one is the improvement of the strike mechanics and boss mechanics. I'm sure you guys have noticed if you go and fight in the Shield Brothers strikes, that boss battle where you have two different bosses with two very different attributes and abilities, and then they both come out at the same time and kind of combine into one guy at the end, that is really interesting compared to something like the Year 1 Nexus strike where you were literally in this area and you just shot at the boss who never moved, like stayed in the middle the entire time, never did anything really special other than shoot at you. So again, the mechanics involved in the strikes and especially the boss fight mechanics have been definitely improved over what they were usually in Year 1. Secondly, randomization was added into the strikes in the sense that you can go to a certain area sometimes in a strike and fight the Fallen, but then you can go to the same area of the same strike and fight the Taken a different time. This is an element of randomization that really makes replayability more of a factor. It's going to feel different if you play a strike when you're fighting Taken than if you're playing that same strike fighting the Cabal, for an example. Now, the third major change to strikes, and arguably one of, if not the most important, was the addition of strike-exclusive loot. This was absolutely huge in increasing players' motivation to play strikes. Before strike-exclusive loot, you were basically playing strikes to level up your Vanguard, to which at that point wasn't very useful anyway, so there really wasn't a huge incentive to play strikes. But now, with strike-exclusive loot and the desire from players to get stuff like the Imago Loop, like the Grasp of Malik, like the Scion Flare Mantles, all of that stuff is hugely desirable in the game right now, and that is a huge motivating factor in making people play strikes. Now, the reason I went over those three factors is because it's important to understand how strikes were improved in the past when we're now talking about how to further improve strikes in the future. And let's go over my main ideas, and of course, if you guys have any more ideas, please leave them in the comment section down below. But my main ideas for how to improve strikes. First and foremost, we need more strikes. Now, that kind of sounds pretty simple, and I'm sure some of you are expecting a little bit more of a brilliant idea than that, but seriously, more strikes is extremely important. And the best way to illustrate this is to look at where strikes were vastly improved with the Taken King, and look at the fact that everyone was playing these massively improved strikes, but they got boring because we had only those few, like 5 or 6 strikes to play over and over and over and over and over again, and once it's 6, 7, 8 months after the fact, you just don't care that the Shield Brothers has better mechanics because you've done it a million times. It took all the way up until the April update for new strikes to be added. This just can't be done. There needs to be more of an effort on Bungie's part to add in additional strikes every so often. I'm not talking about every month have another April update and add 2 new strikes. I mean, that would be fantastic, but I'm not sure that's realistic. But every 3 or 4 months, having an April update kind of sized addition to Destiny, and heck, it doesn't even need to be April update sized, but just a sort of update that actually adds 1 or 2 new strikes every 3 or 4 months would really help rejuvenate the strike playlist. To be blunt, frankly, if new strikes are being added with the Rise of Iron and they're fantastic, it's not going to matter if they're the only strikes that are going to last us all the way until Destiny 2. People are going to just grow to hate them. And in fact, speaking of that, apparently there's not going to be that many strikes added with the Rise of Iron. The Taken King added, again, a bunch of new strikes, but with the Rise of Iron, I mean, on the official Xbox store, it only says that one new strike, one entirely new strike is being added. And since then, Bungie has said, oh, new strikes, but they haven't said entirely new. So the evidence points to the fact that there's only going to be one new strike with the Rise of Iron, and then 1 or 2 more updated strikes. But that isn't a bunch, so it's really going to be on Bungie to keep adding strikes every once in a while. Again, every 4 months, that's not too much to ask for, I think, just to rejuvenate and keep the strike playlist fresh. Now, the next suggestion I would have is things to further incentivize people to grind the strike playlist. Destiny is a grindy game. I'm sure everyone still playing it is very aware and very willing to take a part of the grind. So having an incentive for players to more commonly grind the strike playlist, I feel like it would help. Right now you have a bonus where if you stay in the strike playlist 3 times in a row, you will start to get more and more experience, and then after the 3rd time, you're going to get that capped experience for the rest of the time. Why not increase that? Why not increase it all the way up to 6 times in the strike playlist, and you keep getting more and more and more bonus? So if you're in there 6 times in a row, you're going to be getting a lot more experience towards your Vanguard rank than if you were in 3 times right now. That's just going to further incentivize people to, take a part of the grind. People are already playing strike playlists, 10 times in a row. Why not just incentivize them to do that further? Why not reward your most loyal and most dedicated Destiny players? Furthermore, it actually also says in the description of strikes that if you stay in it 3 times in a row, you're supposed to get better rewards. But I remember very vividly seeing a Reddit post where someone actually went in and played, 50 strikes when they were getting the 3 strike bonus, and 50 strikes when they played a single strike and left and joined back into another strike, so they were getting no bonus, and they got pretty much the exact same rewards in terms of, strike exclusive loot and legendary engrams that were dropping for both. So the bonus in loot drops that you get for staying in the strike playlist 3 times in a row is so minuscule that, again, someone actually went in and did 50 in both and noticed no discernible, there was no statistical difference. So that needs to be improved. I'm not talking about, if you're in the strike playlist, 6 times in a row, you start getting a legendary engram every single time. That might be a little bit ridiculous, but it needs to be enough of a bonus that's actually noticeable for players. That's all I'm asking for. And the third and most important factor when talking about how to improve strikes in Destiny is to build upon the fixes that were introduced in the Taken King. We need to have more diverse and interesting mechanics, more diverse and interesting boss fights. We need to have more randomization. I would love to play a strike where you can actually, at the beginning of the strike, take a right or left path, and then basically you play essentially 2 different strikes and they meet up in the same spot. That would be absolutely fantastic. And lastly, the last factor that really needs to be built upon, I think is the most important factor to be built upon, is the idea of improving strike exclusive loot. Again, it is one of the main reasons people play strikes. It is one of the main motivating factors in getting people to play strikes, especially when you're adding new strikes. When they added the updated Winter's Run and you could fight the Taken version of the Archon Priest and get the Stolen Will, that was absolutely awesome. I finally got a Stolen Will, actually a couple of weeks ago was my first time I got one, and it's awesome. Every time I would play the Winter's Run strike, I would be super excited to potentially get that new strike exclusive loot. But At the same time, they had it so that if you're not versing the Taken version, you get shit all. Like, if you fight the normal Archon Priest, you don't get anything. There's no strike exclusive loot tied to it. And in the Malik strike, there's only one strike exclusive loot piece tied to it, and it's a Hunter helmet. So if you're not a Hunter, you don't really care about that strike, and frankly, the Winter's Run strike should be dropping 2 pieces of exclusive loot, just like every other strike. Again, strike exclusive loot is such an important motivating factor in making players play strikes. The new strikes that are going to come out, they have got to have 2, preferably 3 exclusive strike items tied to them. And in fact, a great idea would be to go back and introduce new strike exclusive loot for the current strike. Introduce a new sidearm, a new strike exclusive sidearm, for example, that spawns with the Shield Brothers strike. Why would you do that? Well, it's going to motivate players to play all of the strikes, including the old ones, rather than just, leave the game until they get the new strikes, which unfortunately often happens. If you're just going to introduce some new strikes into the game with the Rise of Iron, people are just going to leave games and leave games and leave games until they get those new strikes and they can get that new gear. If you retroactively go back and introduce new strike exclusive loot to the old strikes, that's not going to happen, and that's really going to rejuvenate the strike playlist for quite a while. And also, and frankly this might just be wishful thinking, but I would really love them to add something even more so to distinguish the strike exclusive loot. For example, add a new perk that can only spawn on strike exclusive weapons. That's just going to even further increase the desire for players to get them and the diversity within the game. I think it would be a neat thing to do. But those are my ideas for how to improve strikes in Destiny. Now, if you agree with me and want to see these implemented, it's up to you to help spread the word by simply liking and especially sharing this video. Now, if you have more ideas that you think would help strikes, again, don't be afraid to share them in the comment section down below. If you guys want to see more Destiny content from me, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day. Now, I got to play Titanfall 2 recently at EA Play. I was invited out to LA to attend a special Titanfall 2 event where myself and a few other YouTubers were able to play the game for a decent amount of time early. We were also given some exclusive Titanfall 2 multiplayer gameplay, which you can see playing in the background during this video. A lot of it was from the trailer, but there's actually quite a bit of it kind of extended beyond what was in the trailer, and actually featuring some new weapons that weren't seen in the official multiplayer trailer, so that's definitely pretty cool for Titanfall fans. Now let's get started by discussing what new features were added in the Titanfall 2 multiplayer.